today's speaker is one of those guys who opens up the box and makes me question the very definition of success, right? So what is success? Is it backstroking through a swimming pool full of cash? Is it having your face on the evening news, hopefully not in handcuffs? Or is it having 100 million people checking Instagram every morning to see what you had for breakfast? Or maybe it's waking up every morning exactly where you want to be, going out and doing exactly what you want to do, and more importantly, not doing what you don't want to do, surrounded by exactly the company you want to keep. So Doug Nordman is a United States Naval Academy class of '82. He's a 20-year submariner who chose a vision of success that is accessible to literally everybody who's ever walked a deck plate, right? So when he retired, he made it real. And since then, he spent a lot of time showing other knuckle draggers how they can have the same thing. So Doug is here to tell us that the key to success is financial independence. And tonight, he's going to share with us some really easy steps for getting there, right? So without further ado, Doug, tell us what you got, man. Welcome to Ringknocker.
Thanks, Jason. Let me start by letting everybody know that I've uploaded the 2-page handout that we're going to work from tonight. If you haven't already seen that, you can get it out of the chat and look at it. I'm going to try to avoid reading the slides and just hit the high points so that we can get to the questions quicker. The first point that I'm going to talk about is one of 5 points. And so after we get those 5 points, I know we've got people at all stages of life here. And so let me try to make this as generic as I can, and then we'll focus in on anybody who's got a particular question. Financial independence has been around for at least 30 years that I'm aware of, and it's probably been out there for maybe decades or even hundreds of years. We all joke about Benjamin Franklin being the very first guy to pursue financial independence. Initially, it was called FIRE because the idea was you hated your job, you hated your boss, you wanted to retire early. And that has not aged well. Today, we talk mostly about financial independence because maybe what you really need to do instead of quit your job is to go get a different career, a different job, and a different boss. The process by which you get to financial independence depends on everything that is your goal. It doesn't depend on some outside authority telling you how to do this. But the way to get there is common for everybody. And on the sheet, I put the big points there about tracking your spending and then cutting out the waste. A little bit about cutting out the waste. The waste is what you decide is waste. If it brings value to your life, you're going to go work for it. You're going to trade your life energy for whatever that thing is that's of value to you. Cutting out the waste is what you do after you've checked your spending for a couple of months and gone back over it and figured out what you care about and what you do not care about. However you do that, cutting out the waste, raising your income, changing your lifestyle, eventually you'll start raising your savings rate. The high savings rate is a factor of income and lowering your expenses. Once you get a high savings rate, then you can start tracking your progress to financial independence. Ideally, the tripwire for your financial independence is going to be at what we call the 4% safe withdrawal rate. This is a computer study. It's about 35 years old now. It's been around for a while. It's been validated, and it's got its flaws identified. The short version is that when you reach assets that are 25 times your annual spending, that's the inverse of 4%. When you reach an asset level of that, then you are financially independent, and it's for a minimum of 30 years. I've been retired from active duty and financially independent for 18 years, and I can affirm that in many cases, 80% of the time, when you use the 4% safe withdrawal rate, you're going to have more money than you need, in some cases, far more money than you need. That's all in the outline. You can learn more about that. And when I'm talking to a military audience, I talk about making contributions to your thrift savings plan and your IRA. And of course, if you've left the military, then you're going to be saving in your 401k, your IRA, and your taxable accounts. The point is that once you maximize all the contributions to your retirement accounts, you're going to continue to save even more in taxable accounts, whatever your savings rate is. And then you can track your progress from that savings rate. You can make predictions about when your financial independence date will be. I have a bullet in there about where to invest. There's a feeling that everybody that's pursuing financial independence is sleeping in a parking lot somewhere and dumpster diving for groceries and recycling toilet paper and being so frugal that it would make other people weep with envy at how much you're saving. And that exactly, I see some thumbs down. That's totally a myth. And the reason people feel that way is because that's the easiest way to raise your savings rates initially to lower your expenses. But it's your lifestyle, and what you invest in is going to determine how close that you get to financial independence, how fast you get there. And so if you're, again, in the military career, you're probably going to be using a thrift savings plan in your IRA. However, once you get out of the military, you can't use the thrift savings plan anymore unless you're a federal civil servant. But you can continue to invest in your IRA or your taxable accounts. And I'll also highlight real estate. Many of the people that have approached financial independence will take a cash flow approach. And by that, I mean they'll sustain their spending with cash flow. They won't worry as much about assets. They'll just make sure they have enough money coming in from net operating income. So real estate is absolutely a way to get to financial independence. The whole point of striving for financial independence, though, is to ensure that you do it at a pace that gives you the quality of life you want. And there's frugality and deprivation. And everybody feels like the initial approach to financial independence requires extreme deprivation. Again, that's another myth. The reality is that when you're saving for financial independence, you feel like you're taking control, you're going in a positive direction, you're challenged, you're fulfilled, and this part of frugality feels like winning. Now, fortunately, in a military audience, we all know where deprivation is. And I never have to explain deprivation to the service members or the veterans. And so when you feel yourself edging over into deprivation, then that's when you need to back off the savings rate a little bit, enjoy your quality of life, have some more fun. But once you reach that 4% save withdrawal rate tripwire, then it's time to think about what you want to do for your next act. Many of the questions I get are about the military transition. And again, that depends on whether you have reached financial independence while you're in the military. It's totally feasible within that 20-year military career if you choose to go that far. You can reach financial independence faster with a higher savings rate. Many people are 5 and out or 1 service obligation in the military, and then they'll get a high-paying job where they'll have a very high savings rate and reach financial independence in as little as 5 or 10 years after the military. The whole point is that you have choices. You can continue to work because it's fun and fulfilling and challenging. You can decide that you're going to wake up every morning with a surf forecast and do dawn patrol. You can decide that you're going to volunteer and work at nonprofits or whatever salary you earn and whatever career you choose after you reach financial independence. You'll just give that away. The point is that you have choices. You don't have to retire early. Instead, you're financially independent and you're moving forward in a positive direction for your next goal. At the 5th bullet point, I talk about the transition process because, again, this is where most of my audience has questions is, how do you get out of the military and how do you find a job and what do you do once you got the job and how long do you want to work? Again, I talk about the resources that we're all probably familiar with and some of you are much more familiar with than me, but LinkedIn and informational interviewing and networking and using that to go find your job. One of my favorite LinkedIn groups is the Veteran Mentor Network. Not so much for the personalities as for the process, the way they take people by the hand and show them exactly how to step through the things they need to look at to work on finding that bridge career and finding that second job. At the end of this 2-page outline, I've got contact data and other resources, websites, books, stuff for you to look at. What I typically find is that when I'm giving a talk to a group like this, about 10% of you're already drinking the Kool-Aid. You're all over this, Jim Ronka, Robert, I see you guys, and so you understand. And another 10%, you're just not in a place where you care about this or you feel like you aren't ready to try to pursue financial independence for whatever reason, many reasons. The other 80% of you are somewhere in the middle. Some of you are looking at this outline and you're beginning to see a flash of inspiration. Others of you are going to take this thing and you're going to put it away and you're going to come back to it months or even years later. So my contact data is in there. And when you come to that point where you're ready to learn more about it, let me know. I do a tremendous amount of correspondence by email and on social media to answer these questions. And many people have generic questions they don't mind asking in a Facebook group in front of 4,000 of their closest friends. Others would prefer to keep that information private and will send me an email and we'll talk about the specifics of your situation. I also will tell you that I am not on the command retention team. I spend most of my time talking about financial independence with people in the military and talking them out of staying in the military. I talk them out of staying to 20. If they're enjoying what they're doing, they wouldn't be asking me questions about getting out in the first place. And so, in some extent, the conversation is giving them permission to think about getting out of the military instead of staying for 20 and retiring to that glorious pension and cheap healthcare. Now, I can answer more questions from the outline, or I can answer more random questions, or this is the part of the presentation where we get into Ask Me Anything. And we'll let Jason tell us when we're out of time here, but looks like we've got plenty of time left over for questions.
We do, Doug. I'm a little curious. I mean, just to sort of set the context for what you do. You see. I would imagine most of the people who you have these conversations with are folks who are getting ready to transition, and many of them are probably younger, right? I mean, they're less retirees than guys who are five and diving kind of. So, generally speaking, where are those guys? Are they on the right path? Have they been saving? Are they sort of have they already sort of got the memo when you get a hold of them, or are they in trouble?
It's all over the bell curve. I hang out at personal finance groups like FinCon, a financial conference, also at financial independence meetups like Camp FI or Choose FI. And so when you go to one of those meetings, they're already on the path. They're probably pushing for financial independence, or they're, many times those questions are, hey, what's next? And when I get questions from people that are in their 40s and 50s and 60s, the question is, I'm finally at the finish line for financial independence. Now what? And what's the next step? What's my life look like after that? People in their 20s and 30s, generally, they're either realizing that they got a problem, they need to fix it. Debt, student loans, cash flow. And we'll talk about that. And somewhere along the line, they become aware of financial independence and the movement, and they start to ask more questions. I've been doing this for over a decade. And so now I'm starting to get the parents of people who are graduating from high school or college and curious about the military and also curious about financial independence. So now we're talking about next generation financial independence.
So you're actually crossing generations at this point.
Well, my daughter and my son-in-law are leading the way on that, and they're at what we call coast financial independence, which is where they've probably saved enough, and they're just going to let it grow while they continue to work for a few more years. But if they wanted to, they could stop contributing to their accounts, to their retirement accounts, and their taxable account.
Hey, Doug, it's Rob. I just want to say thanks for all the help you've given me over the year and a half that I've known you now. I know what you're going to say, but I think one piece of advice that you give that is kind of the opposite of what most people here in the military is not to buy a house while on active duty. Can you talk about that a little bit and explain to the audience why you say that and go counterculture to most Navy or military folks?
Well, most of it's personal experience, right? In the 1980s, everywhere you went, every duty station, you bought a house, because real estate always goes up. And now that the World Wide Web has made us able to search the entire nation by zip code for real estate investment opportunities, that myth needs to die. The other issue is that military families feel pressured by the real estate market mostly into, oh, you got to stop wasting your money on rent receipts. Oh, you got to do something with your housing allowance. Oh, you really need to have a house so that you have room. Whatever the myth is, there's about 10 or 15 of them. What I get from military families, though, is the sad emails where they race into a new duty station, they buy a wonderful place to live, and for all the right reasons. And once they have been there for 18 months, 2 years, they suddenly get a new set of orders, and now they got to move. And it's almost free to buy a house because you're only paying the closing costs. You don't see the realtor's commissions. You don't see a bunch of the other expenses of getting a house ready to be sold and bought. But when you have to transfer out of that duty station, suddenly you realize that you're going to have to bring money to closing. And depending on where you are in the country, it might be a lot of money. I see people that are agonizing over having to bring $5,000 to closing to dump the house, or they'll have to bring $40,000 on Oahu to sell the house, just to closing, just to get out of the real estate contract. And the next thing they do is they say, well, I don't have that much money. I can't possibly sell this house. And besides, real estate always goes up, so we'll just rent it out. And this happens frequently in the Navy home ports, which tend to be on the coast, more expensive, where you try to rent it out and your cash flow is not what you would want from an investment rental property. And so I'm seeing people who say, well, I'm not losing money because the rent is paying my mortgage. Well, you are losing money. You're just not aware of how fast it's being lost. And on and on and on. These are people that bought a house for whatever reason they bought it, and now they don't have enough money to sell it, and now they aren't getting enough rent to be a landlord, and for many of these people, being a landlord sucks. And so they don't want that job. So the answer to this is a blog post I've written a number of years ago, says, don't buy a house on active duty. If you want to make the most of your housing allowance, then house hack, have some roommates or figure out a way to rent a place that's far below your housing allowance. If you're wasting money on rent receipts, well, actually, you're probably putting that money that you're not spending on excess housing expenses, you're probably putting that in your thrift savings plan and your taxable accounts. And just the whole process of buying a house, it takes research, it takes time and due diligence. And when you're transferring into a new duty station, you're going to spend maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 weeks finding a place to live. That's not how you go out and search for an investment rental property. So all those things, I tell people, if you want to invest in real estate, well, go ahead and invest in real estate. Just don't buy it to live in it unless you're planning to house hack it or do a live-in flip or do something that's an advanced real estate investment technique. For the vast majority of military families, just keep renting, live on base, but live below your housing allowance and live below your expenses.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you think about it, you can't really imagine a more motivated seller than one who's under PCS orders.
And I see people that have 2 or 3 months of vacancies in some smaller duty stations across the country, places like Minot, where there's just not a tremendous housing demand at the moment.
It's not a bad place to be a real estate investor, right? You buy that stuff cheap.
Oh, yeah. If you're going to invest, you're going to invest, but you're going to do it right, and you're going to invest where it makes sense, not just because you happen to be stationed there.
Yeah, amen.
Jason, do you welcome counterpoints or personal experience?
Oh, please, yeah, knock it out.
So, Doug, you and I, hey, Nords, you and I had spoken about, our own personal paths to FI. It doesn't always work out badly for real estate, but a lot of it has to do with timing you can't control. So market swings could very much affect, even if you're in a negative or positive or neutral cash flow with a rental that, say, you lived in and then PCS'd and rented out. When you come to sell that house, the overall real estate market will have a huge effect on that. So sometimes timing happens to work out right. Our situation was that timing happened to work out right for some property that we had bought, lived in, held. And that was kind of our backstory of why we were able to pull the trigger on our FI life. But it could have worked out very, very differently with a different timing. I happened to have retired right at the right time. We got other things, but yeah, so real estate worked out, but it could have worked out very differently.
Yep. And again, it's not necessarily going to make you wealthy. The reasons that people are buying a house are because there's issues with base housing, or there's issues with school districts, or the number of bedrooms that your family needs, or sometimes pets. And having said, don't buy a house on active duty, don't buy a house when you retire. I'm one of the worst examples of that, because I am a landlord and we do own more property than we really need in our lives. But we find that as landlords, that if you're pet friendly, you get a better class of tenant, surprisingly, than if you just rent to any old family, whether they have pets or not. The people that have pets are working hard to find a place where they can rent, where their pet is welcome, and they're grateful for it. Other questions?
Well, I just sort of piling on to the real estate thing. There's also, I think, the question of, shall we call it flexibility, right? I mean, even after the military, I live in Indonesia, right? My girlfriend owns a couple of condos in Miami, and I mean, especially with COVID now, you can just imagine what it's like trying to find a new tenant, and we got two, coming up on the end of their leases. So, I mean, that is definitely something we'd rather not have to contend with, but it's a major evolution to unload a condo, especially in Miami in the middle of a pandemic, right? So, unless you're planning to be local, one could argue that a more portable investment might be a better idea.
Well, I'll point out too that the people that are professional real estate investors, and I mean, if people that go in there with the due diligence, with the discipline, with the proper search tools, they're going to form a team. And you in Indonesia are learning all about long distance landlording, and that's exactly the kind of thing you'll do is you'll form a team eventually to help you manage those properties. Those people are going to be fine. It's the military families that either get misled into buying a house because they want to stop paying rent, or the military families that for whatever reason can't live in a rental property or can't live on base. And now 2-3 years later, they're trying to sell the house. They're leveraged with a mortgage. They have absolutely no time left. They have to get to the next duty station. Suddenly they're accidental landlords.
Well, that's, so this is a really good point. And it dovetails nicely with, with my own experience in the financial markets, where you see something similar, and also with a presentation by a guest speaker a few weeks ago, Stuart Grazer, who is still on active duty. And
Yep.
you know Stuart?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right? So he's built his real estate empire on active duty, right?
He's not going to have any problems because he knows what he's doing.
He knows exactly. He knows what he's doing. He made he had a long list of bullet points. I said, listen, Stuart, what's the one thing, right? And his answer was, look, you got to have a team. You got to have a really solid team. Well, the same is true in the financial markets. It's true everywhere, right? I mean, there are amateurs and professionals. And, all other things being equal, and when an amateur walks into a market populated by professionals, guess what happens? They eat your lunch. Right? So if you think that you're going to just walk into, whether it's the stock market or a real estate market, and just, have a bunch of the pros over a barrel, you're in for a bit of a tough surprise.
Yeah, Jason, I can add to that a little bit.
Yes, sir.
I have 30 plus years of experience in different forms of real estate and commercial, residential, everything. And one of the things that I love to do is work with other vets and people that want to become investors and all that, and then maybe get into business. But if the professionals never have a home run every time, what makes you think the amateurs are going to do it? Yeah.
Right.
So, right. Okay. Yeah. And,
now let's talk about the stock market and cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So and in my 30 years of experience doing this, if a developer, somebody who owns office buildings, if they've told you that they've gotten a great return, and never had a loss, never had a dog in their whole career, they're full of bullshit. That's reality, Yeah. So just keep it that way. If you don't have the time and energy or desire to become a professional at it, right, then invest in real estate other ways through other people that are professionals. Okay, that's what I tell you. You can rent your whole career if you want in the military, and put money into a REIT or something, or throw some money into
you're
the developer.
In real estate.
Yeah,
it's
you're
liquid.
Indirectly.
I've put more resources in that 2-page handout too. If you do want to learn more about real estate and investing in real estate, there's more resources there to go to. And Jason, you're probably learning that you're just going to rent for life. I mean, I don't know if you own real estate in Indonesia, but you're probably
you can't. I can't.
Yeah,
I can't.
So you're going to rent for life.
You got to be Indonesian. Yeah. It's on the other hand, I'm going to rent for life at $500 a month, so it's okay.
Yeah, keep renting.
Listen, Doug. Okay, so we don't buy real estate on active duty. That makes a lot of sense. But what do we do? Like, what's your go-to investment for a guy who's got a regular income, right? He's getting his COLA. He's got the housing allowance and everything. So where do you park your money?
On active duty, when you're in the military, it's fairly straightforward. You're going to put your money in the thrift savings plan. For those of you that haven't heard, the blended retirement system for service members today offers a match. So you've got to put 5% of your base pay in a thrift savings plan to get the full DoD BRS match. And then you could put more money in. What is that, like a
401k? They do matching and stuff? I haven't heard of that program.
Yeah, the blended retirement system has a 401k, a 5% match. So you have to, you can't front load, you got to make it 5% every month of the year to get the match. And it's caused a lot of people to develop financial literacy at a level they have been previously unfamiliar with. There's a lot of downsides on the mechanics of the blended retirement system, although financially it offers more potential. So that's an educational process, making sure people understand things like put 5% of your base pay in a thrift savings plan. And beyond that, you're just going to continue to invest in passively managed index funds with low expense ratios. And so maybe you're going to decide to maximize your contributions to your IRAs next, or maybe you're going to go back and maximize your contributions to the thrift savings plan. If you deploy to a combat zone and you're getting combat zone tax exempt pay, well, now that's a separate spreadsheet to load up the thrift savings plan. And if you're transitioning, you're going to have a transition fund, of course. But once you're leaving the military, then the question is, what do you do with thrift savings plan? And what am I going to do with my other investments? And you're just going to continue index funds. Now, I do get the question about, I've got this great stock in Tesla. I've got this great investment in cryptocurrency, and that's going to be my real rocket ship to my rich life.
Right.
And my answer to that is asset allocation. You've got to pick your asset allocation. Resources in that handout show you where to go to learn more about that if you're not familiar with it. If you want to invest in one of those exotic instruments, then essentially keep it to about 10% of your asset allocation. Over your overall asset allocation, put 10% into whatever it is that you're positive you are a brilliant investor who knows far more than anybody else about this opportunity.
Especially the pros. Yeah.
Well, maybe you are right. Maybe you're the first person to figure out cryptocurrency or some other exotic investment. But 10% is enough for when your wisdom has been validated for that to move the needle on your net worth. And 10%
It's
is
like
also
going to Vegas. Don't bring more than you can afford to lose.
Well, that's the other side of it, is that 10% is small enough to not hurt you too badly when it turns out you're not as brilliant as you thought. We call that experience. And for example, one of the things I did in retirement, a friend of mine who I've since forgiven him, but a friend of mine introduced me to angel investing. I've been in Hawaii Angels for a little over 10 years now, and I've put about 10% of my asset allocation into angel investments. I have yet to be enriched by angel investments. I've learned to call it more angel philanthropy. But I've learned a tremendous amount about the industry, about the process, about due diligence, about accounting, about running a business. It's been a very expensive MBA program, but it carries the experience built into it. And I've become a much better investor because of it. And the other side of angel investing is that I am not going to be tempted to try this when I'm 75 years old.
Amen, brother. Hey, Doug, what island are you on?
I'm on Oahu. I was sent to Pearl Harbor in 1989. We live in the center of the island in Mililani. We've been here for over 30 years.
Yeah, I used to live in Waimanalo, way down there in the bottom.
You understand, yeah.
Hey, Doug, do you want to talk about getting debt-free versus, or would you recommend getting debt-free versus that and emergency funds?
When you're on active duty, debt-free is a good place to be just because you never know what's going to happen with your pay. An example, my daughter transitioned from active duty into the reserves. She went to the first year weekend. They said, "Ooh, there's this chance to go to a 89-day class. You get orders. It's a great deal." And all you have to do is put in a travel claim with a defense travel system. And some of you heard this story before. 6 weeks later, the Navy had racked up fees on her credit card of over $6,000 and had not paid off any of that. Yeah, it all worked out, but it was the defense travel system. And so when you're on active duty, you do need an emergency fund to handle things like plane tickets home. Maybe a month or two your pay is screwed up. You don't need 8 months of emergency fund, but you certainly need something to cover something like the expenses of a transfer. Your housing allowance doesn't start up when you expected. You have deposits, that kind of thing. Maybe your emergency fund is $5,000 or $10,000 instead of the conventional wisdom as a civilian employee where you would have maybe a 6 or 8 month emergency fund. Debt-free, to me, debt-free means get rid of the consumer debt. If you're going to use credit cards, pay them off every month, don't carry a balance. If you are going to use credit cards, then use them intelligently and hack the heck out of them. For those of you who aren't aware, the credit card industry has started issuing very, very good credit cards to active duty military and waiving the annual fee. And so you'll get a credit card that carries a $550 annual fee from American Express. The first thing you do is waive that, and then they start giving you $400 or $500 worth of annual benefits on top of that. If you're disciplined enough to use that credit wisely, I'd take advantage of it. However, if you're racking up consumer debt and living paycheck to paycheck while you're not managing your career, what's happening is the military is owning you. Also, other debt-free, student loans I'm ambivalent about a student loan. Some people sleep better at night knowing they're paying off their student loans. Others are working on something like income-based repayment or maybe even public service loan forgiveness. And if you decide to do that, that's because that's the rule. You've got a system that lets you do that, and you're going to take advantage of it. If you've got the discipline and the skills to navigate that, then that's what you should do. Other debt is good debt. I see a mortgage as good debt if you're investing in real estate, or if you felt like you had to buy your home, you're probably going to carry a mortgage. I've carried a mortgage into retirement. I'm not going to pay off my latest mortgage until I'm 87 years old, but life goals now. Other debt that could be considered a gray area is buying a car. I haven't bought a new car in 30 years. I've paid cash for all the cars I've bought in the last 30 years, so I'm not a real fan of borrowing money to get a car, let alone a new car. However, if a dealership...
Where would you drive?
Well, around here, it's a really easy decision, yes. But the other side of that is that if the dealer is going to offer you a 0% loan or a very low interest rate on your next car, well, you might be paying too much because they've got to make their money somewhere. And so that's why I tend to avoid car debt, although I can certainly understand there are reasons to have it. I'm not a Ramsey guy. I'm not, everything is debt free. I'll never use a credit card again. I understand the system. I've worked with a lot of people who do follow Dave Ramsey, and there are people out there that will never carry a credit card, and it works for them using cash. But I would advise using debt intelligently, especially when you're going to be able to make more money from having that debt than you're paying in interest.
Hey, Doug, I got something to add. So there's a psychological part of debt as well that I found. I find being debt-free to be very psychologically freeing. So not owing money to anybody for anything, I think for me is a happy place. So I like to use the word equivalent income, the term equivalent income, that, I don't have to work to make a payment for something that, even if it's good debt, I don't have to work to make the payment for that debt. So that,
right.
The debt-free situation can allow some leverage to not have to work for that equivalent money.
Absolutely.
So there is a fine line between, it's a whole argument of pay off your house or don't pay off your house. Well, you don't pay off your house and you carry a mortgage, you put whatever equity you might have put into the house to pay it off into the stock market, and you might make more, or you might not, because the stock market may tank right when you're trying to make your money. So there's a very, it really is almost a roll of the dice sometimes as far as to which scenario will be better. But I like to bring in the psychological, emotional factor of maybe that is, if I had a lot of money in the market that I would have otherwise put in the house, would I be able to sleep, watching CNBC every day and seeing the markets? I probably wouldn't be able to.
I don't care where you're invested. Watching CNBC is a bad idea in the first place.
Well, it's on in the house every day, all day, except for Giants baseball. But there's a psychological element, I think.
Yes, there is.
To debt as well.
Let me make 3 points on that. The first point is the universal answer in personal finance is it depends. That's the universal answer. Any question you've got about personal finance, the answer is, well, it depends. The question about having a mortgage, I've been leveraging a mortgage in the stock market. And so we've taken my pension and a mortgage and offset the two. The income from the pension pays the principal and interest on a mortgage. And I've been tracking this spreadsheet for 17 years now. And believe it or not, the returns on that are approaching the long-term average of the stock market, about 7 to 8%. And so if you can borrow money at 2, 2.5, 3, even 5%, you're still going to make money in the long run being more than 10 years. So that's the math and the logic. But Jim, you make a very good point. After 10 years of blogging and longer than that at answering these kinds of questions, these days, everybody understands the mechanics pretty much. And I don't need to explain high savings rate. I don't need to explain asset allocation very much. What I do need to explain is the behavioral financial psychology. People know that they feel a certain way. They'd like to know why. And you can explain, maybe you don't feel comfortable carrying debt because you're having trouble sleeping at night, and maybe your asset allocation isn't working for you because you have trouble explaining it to your spouse without a 15-minute dissertation. And so those emotional things will hijack your financial independence plans every time. Nothing will derail your progress to financial independence faster than behavioral economics and not understanding how the feelings are affecting your ability to do the things that the math and logic say should work.
Doug, it seems like I recall in your bio that you are also donating the proceeds from your books to nonprofits of some sort or another. Who do you support?
All my writing revenue goes to military-friendly charities, and currently that's Fisher House Foundation. Also give some money to Wounded Warrior Project. The way I do that is that people that give me stories or share information or advice in a book that happens to use that, they get a vote on what nonprofit gets the royalty money, the revenue.
You know more FI people than I do. You run around in circles that I haven't plugged into yet, but do you find that most FI people, especially younger ones, have some sort of backstory that that enabled them to go FI, that is not really usually the hard, long slog of investing and getting a match from your company and living frugally? So selling a business, real estate, inheritance, obnoxious amounts of income. What have you kind of seen as sort of a common thread between all of those, or is it really across the map on how people eventually get to FI?
That's the one. It's a big bell curve. There are people that are extraordinarily frugal with low incomes who reach financial independence. I know an Air Force veteran who was extraordinarily frugal with his savings rate while he's on active duty. He was saving 70 to 85% of his income. Whoa. He was living a great life. If you sat down with this guy and started talking with him about what he did last week, it would go on for 15 minutes. Oh, no. You kidding me? With a savings rate like that, he's very attractive to the opposite gender. But one of his stories was he was travel hacking a hotel, and somewhere along the line, they became aware that he was engaged to this woman, and they actually gave him a huge discount for the wedding suite just to encourage them to come back for the wedding. But when he left active duty, he went out and got another job, a bridge career in his occupation, which was cyber stuff and networking, and ended up with $160,000 a year job. So he is now financially independent, still working, enjoying life. And on the other hand, he doesn't do anything at work that he doesn't want to do. He knows that he can quit at any time, and they're keenly aware that he can quit at any time as well. I don't know if you know, his name is Justin Taylor. He's an Air Force veteran now, but at the time he was blogging about savings Sherpa. I'll stick a link in the notes here in the chat. There are people out there that have extraordinarily high incomes that are living paycheck to paycheck and struggling. But there are also doctors. I don't know if you're familiar with all the doctors in the financial independence media. Guys like Jim Dolly, the white coat investor. He's a Navy trauma surgeon veteran who's gone on to great success and partnering in his own business as a trauma urgent care clinic. Other guys of that ilk who have some relationship with surgery or the operating room. And it is all based on high savings rate. And that high savings rate will overcome a lot of stupid mistakes. I am living proof of that. But it all depends on how much money you feel you need to support your lifestyle and how hard you're willing to work to accumulate 25 times the assets.
And Doug, to that point, what I've noticed is what somebody's frugalness is another person's, starvation. So it all depends on what you want out of life. I'm sure that, if you want to drive a Beamer and have a huge McMansion and travel a lot, you're going to have to accumulate more wealth and you're going to have a longer path. So, I've also been sensitive to that some people would criticize you or anyone who is living a certain lifestyle that may not have the resources to do things that other people consider to be essential, expensive trips, expensive cars, and that sort of thing. So sometimes you're fighting against a bit of cultural momentum that says you got to spend more, you got to keep up with the Joneses, you got to live to the spend that paycheck and more. And it does take a break from, you need to break away sometimes from that, Western, especially American culture that says you need to live a certain way. But people will criticize you and people will wonder what the heck you're doing, living that way. But again, it really is not one size fits all kind of proposition. What FI means to one person would look.
No, I will say though, Jim, that the reason you're financially independent is because you lived a life of deprivation and you retired poor, and now you're living a poor lifestyle. So it works for you, but it's not sustainable, and you're bored and you're unfulfilled, and you don't have any way to spend the empty hours other than sitting on a couch watching TV.
And this is water instead of alcohol. So, yeah.
As far as we know, yeah.
I didn't do an adult beverage check tonight. Huh? Hey,
it's afternoon. I'm still drinking coffee.
Amen, brother. There's a dynamic that I think is it's just sort of built in, right? But you need to have a certain amount of let's call it experience or maturity before you can really recognize it firsthand. And it's this: there are good times and bad times, right? And when times are bad, you protect yourself, and you certainly don't take on any more obligations than than you can because times are bad. But when times are good, it's really easy to take on obligations that, whatever it is, to take on obligations that you don't really notice because times are good, right? Until things go downhill again. And now suddenly you're stuck with that, pick a thing, a car payment, a credit card payment, some obligation that is still there from the good times, even though the times are, no longer support it. And so there's that awareness that I think certainly comes with age, right? Where you're aware that just because things are good this week doesn't mean that it's going to be like this for all time. They're going to change. They always do. And you need to be in a position to support yourself when they do. Doug, how do you communicate that to somebody who's 26 or 29 and is about to get out of the military and become an instant millionaire? Or you just don't bother?
Well, they have to be ready to hear that. But I also talk about the fact that this is for life. It's got to be a sustainable life. You got to have something that you're going toward, not just running away from the military. Right. And they're going to get the message in small doses. One of the biggest challenges I have is talking to somebody who's in the military and who feels as if when they leave the service that it's the military inferiority complex. They're worthless and weak. Drop and give me 20. You'll never make it in the civilian world. You're barely capable of performing at your current rank, let alone being promoted. You'll never be able to handle it working for a civilian corporation. And so you guys all understand because you've come from that attitude of scarcity, that military career where you worry that you're going to run out of stuff and it's all zero-sum game, into once you're out of the military, you become aware of abundance and there's opportunity everywhere. Now, it's very hard to explain that to somebody who's in their 20s, that there is really abundance out there. And just by giving away your skills, your sharing, your ability to help, karma sounds kind of sappy, but the whole point is that by networking and by sharing and by working with others, that you will find many more opportunities. And that's where that abundance part kicks in. Again, it's more of experience than it is me being able to stand up in my ivory tower and tell you how that works.
Hey, Jason, one of the most powerful tools that we use in our programs is called the one-page personal plan. And the game changer in the one-page personal plan is thinking out where you want to be in 25 years. In fairly concrete terms, moving down to 3, which is the bridge to 25 from where you are today, which is now. And what Doug knows is that a lot of this is math. So if you think out where you want to be in 25, or maybe you can't think 25, maybe you can think 10, and you want to have this lifestyle, and you want to be living in this house, and you want to have this income and all that sort of stuff, then as Doug would say, there's the power of compounding and investing and all that stuff. And now you apply the math and you just move down to, well, what do you need to do right now? I certainly wasn't smart enough to do that. I always had these fuzzy little things on where I wanted to be when I transitioned out of the military, or when I got out, where I wanted to be in 5 or 10 years. And I never really took the time to sit down and do the math like Doug could help all of you do. And then say, okay, well, that means you need to have a portfolio or a passive investment income or a salary of or whatever at this date, which means you need to be doing these things now. And what ends up happening is we don't do these things now, and then we keep imploding on ourselves along the way, and then we're stuck in a rock and a hard place. And so I know Doug would say, do these things now, even if you're 25 and you're Superman or Superwoman, and you just think you're gonna, there's no kryptonite out there for you. I'm here to tell you at age 66, that's not true. it's important to make those decisions at 26 or 30 or whatever.
But you also want to live a quality of life that fits your lifestyle, and maybe there are times when you're going to be willing to work another 4 or 5 years just to be able to do that thing in your 20s, whatever it may be. And that's the best time of your life to take the outrageous choices, the opportunities, the hit it out of the park kind of thing in your 20s. Probably it's more difficult with a spouse and kids, but that's the time of your life to do it.
Well, Bill, of all the tools that I experienced in your cohort, the one that actually made the most significant impact on me was that life wheel, right?
Yeah.
This right, because yes, you need a plan, but you plan for success in the things that matter. And when I went through that exercise, it really astonished me that many of the things that I thought mattered a great deal didn't so much, and things that I hadn't really been thinking very hard about mattered a lot. And the good news was that those things weren't necessarily the most expensive things.
And the fun thing about those exercises, Jason, whether it's Life Wheel GPS you do every 90 days, or whether it's this one-page personal plan where you're thinking way out in the future, is this: all of us are going to be very, very surprised, and Doug's not surprised because he knows this, that whatever your definition of wealth is, it's probably a lot smaller than what you think it needs to be. Mm-hmm. When you actually do the math, I have people who come into some of my programs and I say, hey, what's the outcome? Oh, well, I want to sell my business for $300 million. Really? Why? Well, I need this and this. I said, let's do the math on that, because, wow, that's great. Let's do that. 300 million, we're going to build that. But did you know that you can have a hell of a lifestyle in a lot smaller valuation, in a lot smaller portfolio, a lot smaller exit? And a lot of people never do that math. Doug can probably do it in in a minute. Say, oh, you have this much money and you're this old and you want this much income at this date. Boom. And then you go, really? And so I think a lot of us never really do that math. We just have these fuzzy dreams. And Jason, what you're right is, I saw you accelerate once you got a grip on the most important things. Mm-hmm. And I saw that transition happening right before your eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big time. I mean, back to this notion of incurring obligations, right? Like once you understand that what you need to hit your 90% point is significantly less than you realized, then you don't spend that extra time establishing all those obligations and striving and right? And instead you gain time and space to think about what you really want to do. Like, what would I do if I really had the time to think about it? All right, well, now you got the time to think about it, and then you can do that stuff because you've actually had enough space to figure it out.
We each have our own personalities and our value systems and our individual experiences, and we're going to look at things through a different lens. So I encourage everybody, especially those who haven't transitioned yet, get to know yourself. Take the bubble tests, the MBTI, the Enneagram. Try to understand as best as you can who you are who you are. Go back to your childhood days in the playground if you need to, but I found that to be a very helpful exercise into figuring out why I was feeling like I was. I didn't do that much on active duty. I probably didn't do it enough for the people that I led. But now that I've been out for 10 years, it's very clear that I'm very different from the other guy, especially school parents who I worked a lot with as a school program volunteer and leader. So just, get to know yourself and appreciate those differences, and it will influence probably a lot of what you decide to do as you march down to FI, what your value system and priorities will be.